challenges of climate change are going to create a lot of opportunities. Should not be seen as a threat.
Conservation agriculture is all about how you farm with less.
For example, in this field, more than a decade now, there has been no tillage here.
Through crop rotation, our yields have really increased.
One of the farming systems that we use is called the net housing, which both has an insect protection as well as a shade protection.
Ile mito ambayo tunarely nayo kwa maji ya ufugaji wa mchele ndekia asikuange na maji.
In this particular field, there's probably been about 150 millimeters of rain, and you can see behind me we've got a healthy crop.
Being recognized and the fact that climate is changing and is coming with it, and also knowing that agriculture also contributes to climate change and also is affected by climate change.
Farmers are not in competition with each other. The more information you share, we both benefit.
Through these, farmers will be able to get high quality crop protection in a affordable price.
The EU has high quality standards, but they really pay for it, and that's why actually farmers keep exporting to the EU.
What they are trying to say is that we should reduce the use of pesticides.
Kuna wakati nilikuwa nimepiga dawa nikaangamiza mchele yangu yote.
Maybe some pesticides that were registered in the past may have to go out of the market.
See those guys, one of the most destructive pests.
So you are going to see a coalition of researchers, a consolidation of industries moving towards solving this problem.
Inadequate access to technology and information are some of the greatest challenges facing the millions of farmers in Africa. Without access to information on modern farming practices and technologies, farmers cannot grow the quantity and quality of crops needed for both their own income and well-being, but also that of the continent. Science-based innovations and good agricultural practices are the basis of achieving better yields and creating revenue streams in local and international markets. In Kenya, the AAK, government ministries, the delegation of the European Union to Kenya, and private companies are all working to educate farmers on agricultural innovations. They are emphasizing that this knowledge is critical in enabling farmers to deliver healthy and safe food for the world, while also stimulating local economies and promoting environmental stewardship.
One of the key roles is to work with other stakeholders and governments to make sure that the operating environment for the sector is conducive and enabling. And through these, farmers will be able to get high quality crop protection in an affordable price.
Close to 4 million farmers have directly benefited from the measures, policies, innovations, and education that the AAK and its partners have put in place. Peter Muthe, a farmer from the Mwea region of Kenya, was seeing his yields decrease year over year. It has not been an easy journey for him to get this lush green crop he is currently producing.
This is chilies.
Climate change, pests, diseases, and inadequate water are constant threats to his production. Pest management involves considering all available pest control techniques, referred to as integrated pest management (IPM), and other measures that discourage the development of pest populations while minimizing the risk to human health and the environment. Pesticides application is one of them and is usually considered the last option. What Peter is doing here, dipping shoes in a biocide disinfectant, is a hygiene method, and this combined with a net house keep pests away. The net house helps in minimizing other environmental factors that affect his farm's production.
So we are inside one of our farming systems. We have different ways of farming in FarmWorks, and one of the farming systems that we use is called the net housing, which both has an insect protection as well as a shade protection. In the last 15-20 years, we are now seeing real effects of climate change in this part of the world. So we are experiencing three things. First and foremost, warmer temperatures, getting hotter, as well as less amount of water available for us to grow crops. And together with the warmer temperatures, you have a problem now of higher levels of pests and diseases. So in this technology here, what we are trying to address is number one, the warmer temperatures. Inside the net house, you reduce the temperatures, as you can feel. If you are outside and The difference between outside and here, it's clearly noticeable because of the black net. Then you have an insect net on the side, and that insect net protects the crops from insects, which allows us to use much less pesticides and much less crop protection products when you have the insect net. So that's another way of dealing with the insect pests. The issues of water, having less water to use, is also addressed because inside the net house, first because of the shade and also because there is no wind blowing in here, your crop loses much less water. So you have much less what we call evapotranspiration. So you can afford to actually use much less water inside a net house than you use in the open fields.
This farming method requires a significant amount of financial investment that is only feasible when farmers see the value and the importance of investing in their farm enterprises.
Productivity per square meter is what matters to a smallholder farmer. The smaller you are, the more you need to produce per square meter of your land. So this produces 2 to 2.5 times per square meter compared to doing it outdoor. So because of the benefits of the fact that the crop is growing much more luxuriantly, it is exposed to much less stress in terms of the wind and the temperatures and all. So the yield is significantly higher here. I would say 1.5 to 2 times higher than what you can grow outdoors.
Peter has adopted additional good agricultural practices after seeing the benefits of integrated pest management aside from net housing, such as minimum tillage and crop rotation.
So we do tomatoes here. So this is a tomato crop. You can actually see the tomatoes are starting to come up. After the tomatoes, which will be about 4 months, we'll come with a rotation crop. We'll probably plant a corn, a sweet corn. And after the sweet corn, which will take about 3 months, we'll probably do a French bean and then come back with tomatoes. We follow a very strict crop rotation. May be difficult for the very large cereal farmers, but for a smallholder farmers, it's extremely important that you do crop rotation so that you don't build up the pests and the diseases of this crop, and you also don't extract too much. Tomatoes and corn, they extract different types of minerals. They also have different types of pests and diseases. So you grow them in a plan in such a way that you don't build up pests and diseases. That's why you do crop rotation.
Peter's farm is sizable, which might lead large-scale farmers to believe crop rotation is difficult on large acreage farms. But Ag Venture Limited, a company founded by farmers who manage several thousand hectares across the Mount Kenya region, Nakuru, Narok and Laikipia counties, has been able to achieve this feat.
The objective of Ag Venture and our Centre of Excellence for Crop Rotation is to enable farmers to go into conservation agriculture. Conservation agriculture is all about how you farm with less resources. Specifically, if you're looking at rain and if you're looking at climate change. So conservation agriculture is a series of techniques designed to make agriculture more resilient to change and to difficult environmental conditions.
Climate change is also happening, and the scientists are also breeding against that. Soil tolerance, drought tolerance, and all of us working together in an ecosystem. When we look at that ecosystem, we have scientists, we have seed companies, we have fertilizers, we have irrigation now going to precision. So we have an entire ecosystem that we have built together to co-create solutions for the farmers.
Many farmers, large or small, are being encouraged to adopt sustainable farming practices such as crop rotation. However, this is just one of the 4 pillars used by Ag Venture to retain soil moisture, use less water, and increase yields. This type of conservation farming has turned the farm into a profitable venture.
The most important thing is crop rotation, reduced tillage, and what we call controlled traffic farming. So if you have a monoculture which is the same crop again and again and again, you lay the environment perfectly for disease to come up. And that can be disease, or it can be weeds or pests or that kind of thing. You will find diseases coming up which affect grasses. You will find weeds that affect grasses, and those weeds, they're taking nutrients from your crop. So if you're growing a crop that for commercial purposes, your weeds are stealing moisture, they're stealing nutrients, and ultimately reducing the yield of your crop. There's a number of ways you can tackle that, but what we found is the most effective way is crop rotation. The more diversity you have in your cropping system, in the end, the healthier it will become. It brings me on to reduced tillage. Tillage was a method used to deal with weeds, but the big problem with tillage is that it also, in the same time it's dealing with weeds, is destroying your soil structure. So in this field behind me here, this field, before this was planted, there was no ploughing, there was no chiseling for this crop to plant. It was planted straight into the ground. The biggest issue is around compaction, and what it does is it has an impact on the soil under the ground and compacts it. Particularly if you've got tractors or livestock, that compaction can go a long way into the ground. And most importantly, what this plant needs is it needs to be able to get its roots as deep as possible. The deeper the roots get, the more moisture is available, the more nutrients are available.
For example, in this field, you see it is on zero till. Several years, more than a decade now, there has been no tillage here. So we harvest and plant for the next crop. For example, if you dig here, you will find that it is soft and it is easy for you to get into the soil.
The final part I mentioned of the system was about controlled traffic. In a nutshell, it's about having set roads within your fields where your machinery is going to go.
This is a tram line. The planter will pass here, the sprayer will pass here, and the harvester will pass the same tram line.
Aside from using these practices, AgVenture also trains farmers across the country on conservation farming.
Farmers are not in competition with each other. In fact, quite the opposite. The more information you share, if I share information, somebody else shares information with me. We both benefit.
So, when you train the farmer on these concepts, they even understand on crop rotation why this one before the other one. Others do crop rotation in terms of, it's the seed I have. It's not the seed you have, it's the why.
Many other farmers have also experienced these farming practices working for them.
My yields have really changed. And to be honest, if AgVenture did not come in to help us farmers, some of us were really wanted to pull out of farming.
There are remarkable achievements when we do conservation farming. For example, in one of my fields where I used to get like 30 bags per hectare, after I started doing conservation farming, I've been able to get about 56 bags per hectare.
Diesel has become very expensive, and the more operations you do in the field, the more fuel that you use on our tractors. So now with less operations in the field, one, we are using very little diesel. That means we are cutting down on our expenses. And then through crop rotation, our yields have really increased. Initially I was probably doing about a ton or two per hectare, but a few that are done canola last season, as we speak, I've harvested a certain field that has given me about 6 tons a hectare.
The fight against climate change cannot be won without the widespread adoption of these innovative farming methods.
Like currently we are trying to look at how farmers behave. We are looking at the behavioral aspect of the farmers. What are the behavioral barriers that really limits farmers' access to knowledge or limit farmers' change of behavior? And we are doing this with partners. But of particular importance is accessing the farmers to change the behavior, making sure that the technologies reach the farmers, being recognizing the fact that climate is changing and is coming with it, and also knowing that agriculture also contributes to climate change and also is affected by climate change, and therefore working ways with which we can improve all this is together so that we maintain the resilience of the industry.
Sustainable farming practices also include protection of biodiversity through judicious use of these technologies. Plant health plays a key role in the fight against climate change, as Professor Mwendwa Mutui, the Managing Director of Kenya Plant Health Inspectorate Service KEPHIS, emphasizes. KEPHIS's main responsibility is to ensure the quality of agricultural inputs and produce to prevent adverse impact on the economy, the environment, and human health. One of their mandates is to encourage farmers to use certified seeds.
KEFIS has been at the forefront in trying to address climate change issues by testing new varieties of plants. For example, we have been able to do national performance trials and testing for distinctiveness, uniformity, and stability for maize varieties which are resistant to maize lethal necrotic disease. We recommend farmers to use certified seed whenever they are planting. The certified seeds will ensure that there will be high yield per unit area, which will result into food security and nutrition, and whatever excess produce they are going to get, they will be able to sell and be able to get some money, meaning they will be income generation.
The functions of KEFIS closely mirror those of the Pest Control and Products Board, PCPB. PCPB plays a major role in the correct use or reduction of the use of pesticides and other farm products. Their important contribution to plant health through processes and procedures that govern farmers' practices helps ensure consumer protection and safety.
The new bill for the food and safety mainly aims at ensuring that Kenyans can have access to safe nutritional food. And this is because in the course of production and handling and also marketing of food, there's a lot of things that happen, and the food can be contaminated and become not fit for human consumption. And what it's doing is it has recommended bringing together the various institutions that have a role to play in the area of food safety. Those who are regulating the soils, those who are regulating the products that are being used either for post-harvest handling or for the pest control.
We have various policy engagements that we are doing, and one for like counterfeit, for instance, working with the multi-agency team to find solutions for counterfeit products, talking to the regulators to increase the penalties, regulations on counterfeit. We are also, because now pressure, we have seen a lot of people taking poisons and everything is for government. So we are monitoring. So we have poison information service that is written on the product labels. We are going to make sure that we accelerate that we capture that information. And also regionally, we believe that for us, the war to win counterfeits must be a regional base.
In line with the EU Green Deal, AAK is working to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. The EU Green Deal is a whole package of policy initiatives from the European Union with the goal of reaching climate neutrality by 2050. All new regulations coming out of the Green Deal will affect the European economic actors, but also some exporters to the EU.
As the EU, I think you're probably aware that we're the biggest export market for Kenyan horticulture. So one way, though there is also other ways, is that obviously the EU is a good market for Kenyan agriculture, both in size but also in terms of quality, which means that you get a good price for the product. So the EU has high quality standards, but they really pay for it, and that's why actually farmers keep exporting to the EU.
And what they are trying to say is that we should reduce the use of pesticides in our production systems. The pesticides should be evaluated on case by case to ensure that the ones which are registered for use in Kenya, they are safe for human health as well as for the environment.
Like now already at Pest Control Products Board, we are already feeling it because maybe some pesticides that were registered in the past may have to go out of the market.
This is a disease. Whether you are inside a net house or a greenhouse, once this comes, you have to treat it. So there is still a very big place for pesticides. We are just advocating that we minimize it and we use it correctly.
Europe's Green Deal would have an adverse impact on the export market in Kenya, as many Kenyan products could be rejected by the Green Deal policies. Sustainable farming practices are one way to offset possible consequences of the European legislation.
So what you'll see is two things. One, consumers in the EU will be much more environmentally conscious, which means that, unfortunately for Kenya, they will say at some point, why should we fly beans and flowers? What is the carbon footprint of this airplane that's being used to get my flowers on the table and the beans on my plate? Which is not necessarily coming in regulations, but it's the consumer that's asking for it. So that's one thing. And actually, very soon there might also be a regulation put in place that makes, let's say, producers in the EU responsible for the climate sustainability of the whole supply chain. So even if, when they import something from, for Kenya, for instance, that they have to make sure that those goods are produced sustainably as well.
So you realize that a sector that was moving in isolation right now, you start questioning it, and they have to work with partners and eliminate or reduce the environmental footprint on what you're producing.
Water is an essential part of farming. Most crops cannot survive without a significant amount of water. Are there methods that smallholder farmers can use to ensure their crops grow with even less water?
The game changer here is a drip irrigation. This drip, it doesn't just give you massive saving on amount of water you use, but we are also able to apply fertilizer through the drip. So we don't need to keep moving the soil so that the fertilizer. So we put the fertilizer in a liquid form and it goes down the drip with the water, because crops don't eat, crops drink. So when you mix the fertilizer in water and you put it with the drip, the crop can drink quicker. And also the crop can be given small amounts of fertilizers on a regular basis than what the smallholder farmer will do. Twice in a season, they will go and dig the soil around the plant and put huge quantities of fertilizer and then cover it. What happens is that the crop is not able to eat all of that. It's like you can't eat all the food for the 1 week in one sitting. So the drip allows us to give this crop water and food on a regular basis, and that's why you see the uniformity, and the crop is growing very well.
Drip irrigation works perfectly for small-scale farmers, but with 1,000 acres of farmland, this option is not viable for ag venture, as the financial investment required is not feasible. What are the alternatives to drip irrigation or rain-fed agriculture, which is becoming less reliable due to climate change?
What we're trying to accomplish is actually moisture retention. So crops need a limited range they need light, they need moisture, and they need nutrients. Traditional farming systems have been very effective at destroying moisture. So all of the pillars are around retention of moisture. And one of the important things there is about residue. So typically when a field is harvested, there are a couple of things that could be done. You could harvest it and then you could come in and bale the straw and take it away. But critically what we try and do is to retain soil cover. And so if you have a healthy system with soil cover, what that means is you're able to retain moisture.
Inasaidia, hapa hakuna absorption by the sun, na tena inaoza, inakuwa part of the manure, increase the organic matter.
The crop that's behind me, it's very important to mention this. We've been in a very difficult season regionally. There's drought everywhere. In this particular field, particular area, there's probably been about 150 millimeters of rain in total. Okay? And you can see behind me we've got a healthy crop. What does that mean? Firstly, there's a national dialogue which is about we don't get enough rainfall. And I think this crop in and of itself proves that that really isn't the problem.
So as we train our farmers, we try to help them understand the concept of retention of residue. You finish getting your maize from the maize cob, and then you don't throw away the maize cob and the stubble to a neighbor. You just try to retain it in your farm that requires it for the next harvest in the subsequent years.
There are farming practices where too much water is just enough. Flooding is a common practice for rice paddies, but with the adverse effects of climate change, water scarcity is being felt in rice fields across the Mwea and Ndekia regions. Changes in weather patterns have forced these farmers to adopt a new rice planting method that requires less water. Using this new method, the Ndekia farms have increased yield while using less water.
Ile mito ambayo tuna rely nayo kwa maji ya ufugaji wa mchele Ndekia na the entire scheme kwa jumla asikuange na maji, na sana sana ile ambaye imetusaidia tumeadapt the new system of rice planting, kupanda mchere na rain. Hiyo inahitaji maji, inahitaji wetting and drying. Hatuhitaji maji kufrand throughout. Ukipanda ukiweka maji unaweza kaa hata wiki 4 hiyo mchere na haitakauka. Sasa tumetoka random planting, ni kupanda hapa ile ya zamani. Kutoka rain kwenda ile ingine unapanda kutoka rain kwenda rain 20 cm. Kwa hivyo ukikompare random system na mchere ya kupanda raini, ya hii ingine ina increase yield na 25% hii ya raini, na watu wameadapt the new system of rain planting.
Normally, there is one planting and harvesting season in rice farming, but with the advent of line planting, yields have increased due to double cropping or planting new rice immediately after the harvest without waiting for the next planting cycle.
Tukipanda, msimu wetu ukifika, tukipanda aturudisi ratun, hivyo sisi tunavuna kulima na kulima na kulima.
Kenya's wide variety of crops, soils, farming methods, and climate conditions mean that no single technology or set of tools will achieve climate resilience and better yields. Various stakeholders are working closely with farmers on identifying the appropriate technologies and inputs that can improve productivity on their farms. With quality training from government bodies, stakeholder organizations, and agronomists, farmers have learned one of the most important things in farming is the responsible and appropriate use of pesticides. Some have learned this lesson the hard way.
Hata mimi kuna wakati nilikuwa nimepiga dawa nikaangamiza mchere yangu yote. Nilipiga dawa, hiyo dawa nilichanganya na ingine ikariaka. Sasa ilichoma mpaka mchere, mpaka magugu yote ikaisha. Wakulima wameenda wakierefuka juu wanaogopa kuchoma. Lazima sasa ukinunua dawa lazima ujue hii dawa inatumiwa namna gani, na ushaona pali pengine imetumiwa.
Now here outdoor we still have the same challenges that the other farmers are facing. We have problems with pests, we have problems with diseases. The only thing I can say is working to our advantage is that we have a healthy, vibrant crop. So this crop is able to withstand. It still has a lot of pests and diseases, but it can be able to withstand because it doesn't have any water stress, it doesn't have any nutritional stress because of the drip irrigation.
Access to quality regulated pesticides and mode of action information is vital. Some pesticides are manufactured in the lab, while some are natural, and the use of both needs to be encouraged.
Like even people who knew traditionally that this particular extract can control certain pests, those are the things that are native in nature that we really need to accelerate. They might not be high-level technology innovations, but we need to support that.
Not only is the use of correct pesticides important, but the correct application of these products is equally critical. AAK is training licensed professional spray service providers to ensure proper application.
The spray service provider team is going not only to improve delivery and use of message, but guarantee also safety, application, and farmers are going to be free. Technologies are going to be used very well in a more responsible manner.
A great practical example on how a farmer can reduce the reliance on pesticides is highlighted by Don White's conservation farming and Peter Muthe's use of net house farming.
There are a very long list of benefits. The most obvious one is yield. So we're typically seeing very substantial yield increases in farms that practice conservation agriculture. But that's not the only thing. We're seeing yield even in the most difficult seasons. So it's not about in perfect conditions what can happen.
So the problem of pesticide is that because of poor use and overuse of pesticides, most of the pests we have in this area are now resistant to the pesticides that are in the market. There are a few pesticides that are still remaining that are effective. If we are not careful, we will lose these ones too very soon. Using a net house or making sure that your crop doesn't grow with stress helps you to reduce the amount of pesticides and for you to use pesticides more effectively. See those guys, one of the most destructive pests in tomatoes.
I think what we can say is that in Kenya, it's quite well known that Kenya uses more pesticides and more fertilizer than neighbouring countries, but actually doesn't produce as much food in terms of productivity. So there's some sort of problem, and it might be an issue of overuse of both fertilizers and pesticides, depending on where you are. Maybe the other important thing to note is when farmers export to the EU and have export grade products, then obviously the EU has certain maximum residue levels for pesticides and so on, which the farmer needs to comply to. But again, Kenya is doing really well compared to a lot of the other countries, I would say.
For us, we think the industry is going to be, the outlook of the industry looks bright. We see the industry growing. Currently, the growth, particularly representing in our sector, is less than 10% growth annually compounded. But we believe that this one is going to open up. The challenges of climate change are going to create a lot of opportunities. It should not be seen as a threat. So you are going to see a coalition of researchers and industry moving not only in isolation, that is crop protection, but you're going to see a consolidation of industries moving towards solving these problems. Pests coming up, diseases coming, and epidemics, new epidemics will come. So we must work together to develop this. The biggest threat that is going to come, in my view, is if we, as a country, we don't take a position or a policy position on how are we going to take technology innovations going forward.
Change is inevitable. Change is constant. The climate is changing, the weather patterns are changing, consumer behavior and government policies are changing nationally and internationally. This means the farmer has to change not only what they farm, but how they farm and how they take care of the environment while at it. It is encouraging to see both small and large-scale farmers committed to reducing their impact on climate change while producing healthier food.
AAK is committed to a sustainable ecosystem that supports and inspires better farming, better food, and better health for all Kenyans. AAK, grow.